Hey there, and welcome to this lab video for Lab 4.4, Linking Tables in Excel Using the Internal Data Model. Now, if you worked through Lab 4.3, we're going to do some similar work. In Lab 4.3, you were using the same data set as we'll use in Lab 4.4, but you gather descriptive attributes into the sales table using VLOOKUP. In this case, we're going to use the internal data model to get over the step of having to use a VLOOKUP and directly replicate the way these tables would be related in their actual database. So let's go ahead and look at our actual ER diagram here and how this data would be stored in a database. We see our three different tables: products, sales transactions, and customers, and we see how they're related. Products and sales are related through the product code, and customers and sales are related through the customer ID. We're going to replicate doing exactly this so that we have the descriptive attributes we want in the transaction table all connected, making it so much easier for analysis. So let's go ahead and jump into the data. So there are a few ways that we can create relationships in Excel, including some that might feel a little bit like shortcuts. But in this instance, we want to just go ahead and walk all the way through how to create a relationship without using the wizard, so you can see what's going on behind the scenes next time you maybe try to do so automatically. So we're going to get started by jumping up to the Data tab in the ribbon. We're going to click Relationships, which, depending on the zoom level that you have on your Excel workbook, this might be a lot larger, but this is the relationship button. You can tell when you just hover over it. And in this window that pops up, we're going to create a new relationship. You can see here that it gives you a place to input information about two different tables, one containing a foreign key and the other containing a primary key. So from the ER diagram we looked at, if we're going to relate our sales table to our products table, we know that our products table has product code as a unique identifier. So it's going to be the related table. And the table with a foreign key is going to be sales transaction because it has product code in that table as a way to relate to the products table. So we'll go ahead and click products and then select that unique identifier, primary key of product code, and click OK. All right, so we can see that this relationship now exists. Let's go ahead and create one more. We're going to create the relationship between the sales table and the customers table, and we're going to follow the same pattern. The customer table is uniquely identified by the customer ID, so we'll select our transactions table and relate it to the customer ID as a foreign key there. We'll click OK, and then we'll just go ahead and close this Manage Relationships window. Now, nothing looks like it happened here. We're not seeing a confirmation other than the fact that we saw those relationships created. But what we're going to do now is create a pivot table, and we will see that we've created these meaningful relationships. So let's jump up to the Insert tab in the ribbon and select Pivot Table. And this is where the step is going to differ from what you're used to so far with the previous labs. We're going to place a check mark next to Add this data to the data model. Once we place that check mark and click OK, again, everything still looks fairly normal, but if I switch my view from active to all, I see all three of my tables are represented here in my field list. So with all of this data, if I extend these tables, we can see all of their attributes are included here. There's a lot that we can do to analyze this data. So we're just going to begin with assessing the count of sales order by business. So we're going to start by placing a check mark next to business name in the customers table, and then scrolling down to sales transactions and selecting sales order ID. This is going to default to a sum of sales order ID, which is actually not meaningful at all. We just want to see the number of sales that have occurred. So we can adjust this by clicking into our value field settings. So here in my values area, I'll click that sum of sales order ID. And from here, I'll select Value Field Settings, and I'll just change this Summarize Value Field by option to Count, and click OK. So just because of the resolution of my screen, I had to adjust a little bit, so let's make this larger again. All right, so what we see here is a couple of items at the same time. We see the benefit of being able to use fields from two different tables, because we can see our business name instead of just the customer ID, and we also see the count of orders each customer has placed. But we also see, if we scroll all the way through it, that every customer in this table has placed at least one order. And this is maybe what we would believe if we didn't recognize that Excel actually defaults to leaving out any record that doesn't have a match for the aggregated value. But we can adjust that, and to put that in more relevant terms, we want to adjust that so we can see if there are any businesses who have not yet placed a single sales order with us. So to do that, we're going to stay here in our pivot table, Analyze tab on the ribbon, and then we're going to jump into Options here. Again, based on the resolution of your screen, you might see this as a button already in your ribbon. As soon as I click into Options, I can click Display here, and I'm going to add a check mark in this box next to Show Items with No Data on Rows. So this is going to help us see if there are any of these rows, any of these businesses that are in the rows that don't have any related item, that don't have an actual invoice associated with them or a sale. Let's go ahead and click OK. And now we can see we actually immediately got A.S. Barbaro that wasn't there already. We've got Duff and so on. All right, now finally we're going to further analyze this data by creating a second pivot table. We can do this really quickly and easily without having to go to the whole Insert tab in the ribbon action by just selecting this existing pivot table, copying all of it, and scrolling to a different area of our workbook to paste it. It begins as a perfect duplicate of the table that you copied, of course, because you copied and pasted it, but now we can adjust the fields that we have in this new pivot table. So in this instance, what we'll want to look at is the product description, the customer state, and the sales order quantity sold. So we're going to start here by removing the items we have in the rows and values currently. So we have a blank pivot table here, and then we'll pull in product description. We'll scroll to the sales transactions table and place a check mark next to sales order quantity sold. And finally, all the way up to customer, and we'll pull in customer state. So here we can see a breakdown of lots of different ways that our different products have been sold. We can look at it by state, by product, and so on. Because of the relationships that you built, you can build pivot tables from any of the fields from all three tables. All right, so that's the end of this lab video. Make sure to take your screenshots and answer any of the questions your instructor assigned in Connect, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.